This evening I sat awake with Harold's cane in my hands. The polished wood was smooth from years of use, a memory more than an object. By noon tomorrow they intended to clear out my accounts. But my granddaughter quietly revealed their plan, and I was prepared. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and write in the comments what time it is where you are now. For 40 years, this house on Ashwood Lane has been my world. I know every corner, the squeak of the third step, the faint draft in the hallway when the north wind blows, the way morning light slips between the lace curtains and spills across the kitchen floor. Once it was alive with music and laughter. Harold, my late husband, would sit at the piano every evening, and our children, Evelyn and Mark, would crowd around, fighting over which lullaby he should play. Those days are gone now, and the house has grown quieter than I ever imagined. I keep busy. Every morning I sweep the porch, polish the old brass cabinet handles, and water the lavender bushes Harold planted by the fence. Sometimes I still catch myself waiting for his low hum, that half-finished song he never recorded. But silence always reminds me he isn't coming back. Lately that silence feels watched. My children have been stopping by more often. Not together, never together, but in short, oddly purposeful visits. Evelyn brings muffins wrapped in napkins that are too neat, too staged. Mark lingers in the kitchen after his coffee, pretending to chat, though his eyes wander toward the locked drawer near the pantry. They say they want to help, but their gazes betray them. One afternoon, Mark leaned against the counter and asked, far too casually, "Mom, have you spoken to anyone about your will lately?" I looked at him over my teacup. "Why?" He smiled, brittle and strained. "Just wondering. You know, planning ahead is important." 2 days later, Evelyn arrived with that basket of muffins. She patted my hand like I was a confused child. "It would be so much easier for you if we managed the accounts," she murmured. I nodded just to avoid an argument, though inside me something stirred. I've managed myself longer than either of them has been alive. That night I locked my bedroom door. I opened my safe and counted every folder. Bank records, insurance papers, the deed to the house. Everything was exactly where it should be. So I didn't sleep well. On my 68th birthday, I woke early, filled with a foolish hope. I set the table with my mother's porcelain teacups, folded linen napkins, and baked a lemon cake. I lit candles, 3 glowing flames that stretched the hours thinner as I waited. By late afternoon, only my granddaughter, Clara, appeared. She was 16, her backpack slung over her shoulder, her face lit by the glow of her phone. "Mom's working late," she said, thumbs moving across the screen. "Uncle Mark had some appointment." I smiled, cutting her a slice of cake. She ate distractedly, barely tasting it. Then she put down her phone and looked at me, eyes flickering with unease. "Grandma," she whispered, "do you have a lot of money in your accounts?" The question stunned me. "Why would you ask that, dear?" She flushed. "Never mind. It's just something Mom said." When she left, the silence returned heavier than before. I carried the untouched cake into the kitchen and set my hand on the metal box that held my papers. My fingers trembled as I traced its lid. That night, unable to sleep, I rose and walked into the hall. That's when I heard it, the faint scrape of a drawer being opened. I froze, heart hammering. In the pale glow of her phone, I saw Clara crouched near the sideboard. "Clara." My voice was steady, though my chest tightened. She startled, tears glimmering on her cheeks. "I'm sorry. I wasn't going to take anything. I needed to see." "See what, sweetheart?" She twisted the hem of her cardigan. "Mom and Uncle Mark were talking after dinner. They said tomorrow, at noon, they're taking you to the bank. They said if you got upset, they'd tell you it was for your own good. That you'd sign the forms because you're forgetful." Her voice broke. "But I know you're not. I thought you should know." I drew her close. Her small body trembled against mine. The betrayal crushed me, but when I pulled back, something colder and sharper had settled in its place. After Clara left, I sat in the dark, waiting. At midnight, I went to the piano. I lifted the bench cushion and reached into the hollow beneath. My fingers brushed the cold lockbox Harold had hidden there years ago. "Safer close but hidden," he'd said. Inside were the very documents that proved the house, the accounts, the insurance. All of it were mine alone. I carried the box to the kitchen table. At dawn, I brewed coffee and called my lawyer, Margaret. "I need to update my will," I said. and move my accounts into a trust no one else can touch. Margaret didn't hesitate. I'll come by this afternoon. Just after noon, Mark's car pulled up. Evelyn followed, casserole in hand. I waited at the table, the lockbox plain in sight. Mom, Mark greeted me with a false smile. We brought lunch. Evelyn's eyes flickered toward the lockbox before darting away. We just want you to be comfortable. I folded my hands. I'm comfortable. Mark cleared his throat. We thought it'd be best to go to the bank today. Take care of everything. Protect you, you know. I appreciate your concern, I said evenly. But I've already spoken to Margaret. My accounts are moving into a trust. No one else will be managing them. The air grew heavy with silence. Mom, Mark said tightly, you don't need to make this harder. I'm not. I'm simply telling you the truth. I closed the lockbox with a soft click. After they left, casserole untouched, I sat at the piano, my fingers brushing the keys. For the first time in months, I felt stronger. That night, I waited again. At 2:30 a.m., the back door creaked open. A shadow moved through the kitchen. Mark. He went straight for the cabinet near the pantry. When he found it empty, his shoulders stiffened. I tightened my grip on Harold's cane. Then I switched on the lamp. Mark spun, his face pale. Mom, I thought I heard something. Looking for something? I asked calmly. He tried to smile. You know how old houses are. I lifted my phone. The call timer glowed. Margaret is listening, I said. I thought it best to have a witness. His smile collapsed. Mom, you don't understand. No, I cut him off. You don't understand. This is my house. That money is mine. And you will never set foot here uninvited again. His voice faltered. You're overreacting. You need to leave. Now. He stared at me, defeated, before slipping out into the night. The door clicked shut behind him, quiet, final. The days that followed were eerily quiet. I swept the floors, brewed my coffee, tended the lavender by the fence, and listened to the silence of Ashwood Lane. But it wasn't the silence of peace. It was the silence of waiting. I knew my children wouldn't return right away. Their pride was wounded, their plan derailed. But greed doesn't vanish with one failed attempt. It festers, looking for new cracks to slip through. 3 days passed before I saw Claire again. She came up the walkway after school, backpack bouncing against her shoulders. Her steps were hesitant, her eyes rimmed with shadows. I'm sorry, she whispered as soon as I opened the door. I didn't know they'd really do it. I pulled her into the kitchen. You were brave to warn me, I said. That took more strength than most adults I know. She sat at the table, fidgeting with her sleeves. Mom says you're mad, that you don't want to see them anymore. I poured her a glass of milk, set out a plate of oatmeal cookies. The simple ritual calmed us both. I love your mother and your uncle, I said carefully. But love doesn't mean letting people hurt you. Sometimes, protecting yourself means stepping back. Her lip trembled, but she nodded. Over the next weeks, Claire came more often. Sometimes with her homework, sometimes just to sit in the garden while I trimmed the roses. Slowly, I realized she wasn't coming out of obligation, she was coming because she wanted to. And in her presence, the house no longer felt quite so empty. Still at night, unease lingered. I double-checked the locks. I kept Harold's cane beside the bed. And I trusted no knock at the door unless I knew the hand behind it. One Sunday afternoon, Evelyn finally called. Her voice was sharp, impatient. Mom, this is ridiculous. You can't cut us out like this. We're your family. I held the phone steady. Family doesn't break into houses at night. A long pause. Then her voice cracked. Mark told you, didn't he? You always did take his side. I'm not taking sides. I'm protecting what your father and I built with our own hands. If you cared about me, you'd understand that. She hung up without another word. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering when my children had started seeing me as a vault instead of a mother. Maybe it was gradual, a drip of disappointment that hardened into entitlement. Or maybe it was always there, waiting for Harold to be gone before surfacing. But then Clara's face would come to me, earnest, worried, loyal. And I'd remember, not all ties were poisoned. Spring came early that year. The hyacinths bloomed pale blue and violet along the walkway, their fragrance drifting through the open windows. I joined a small piano circle at the library, something I hadn't done in decades. My fingers stumbled at first, but the notes returned slowly like an old friend knocking at the door. One afternoon, Clara sat at the kitchen table, sugar from her cookie dusting her chin. She studied me for a long moment before saying softly, "Grandma, you look different." "How so?" "You look happy." Her words startled me. I touched her cheek, warmth filling my chest. "I think I am." Because for the first time in years, I felt like I belonged to myself. Not to Mark's schemes, not to Evelyn's manipulation, but to me. I started making little changes. Fresh curtains for the living room. A new rug for the hallway. I painted the back fence white the way Harold always said we should. Each act was a reclaiming, a declaration that this house, this life was mine still. Evelyn and Mark stopped calling. Weeks turned into months. Their silence was both painful and freeing. I mourned the children I thought I had, even as I accepted the reality of who they'd become. But Claire kept coming. She told me about her classes, her friends, the boy who sat 2 rows behind her and made her laugh. Sometimes she brought over her sketchbook, shyly showing me her drawings. Trees, cats, faces half-formed but full of life. One evening, as we washed dishes together, she said, "I think Mom's mad at me for spending so much time here." I dried a plate slowly. "Do you want to stop coming?" She shook her head fiercely. "No. I like it here. It feels safe." The word struck deep. Safe. That was what Harold had always wanted this house to be. A place of safety, of music and lavender and laughter. Maybe in some small way I was keeping that promise. Life grew softer in those months. I wasn't naive. Mark and Evelyn might resurface someday with new tricks and polished smiles. But I wasn't afraid anymore. I had my trust, my lawyer, and my resolve. Most of all, I had Clara. One warm evening, we sat on the porch as the sun dipped low, painting the sky gold and rose. Clara leaned against my shoulder, and for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel the ache of emptiness. I felt whole. I had thought the best parts of my life were behind me, that all that remained was to endure whatever my children decided. But sitting there with the scent of lavender on the breeze and the steady weight of Clara's hand in mine, I realized something else. I had chosen. I had chosen not to surrender, not to shrink, not to give away what Harold and I had built. I had chosen to belong to myself. And that, perhaps, was the beginning of a new song. One I would finish note by note in my own time.